Hello and welcome to another episode of Only a Bag, an Italy travel podcast. I'm Darcy Melton.
And I'm Nathaniel Malloy.
And we both kind of have allergy things going on, not to be competitive, but mine are worse.
Yes. So we sound weird. It's because things are finally blooming. We are firmly into spring after a month and a half and almost summer, honestly, but it's finally spring. So things are blooming, things are warm, and pollen is just floating around. And I think we both sound a little bit stuffy. So hopefully that does not affect your listening experience too much.
And we will pause if I have to sneeze.
Yes.
So you won't hear my sneezes.
Well,
hopefully.
That's the dream. And today we're going to be talking about Florence. Specifically, we went back in February. We actually meant to do we meant to go straight from the Venice episode into the Florence episode, and we got sidetracked talking about other things, and then we're like, oh, we'll loop around. Well, this is finally looping around to Florence. Next week, we're going to be doing a Florence Condensed episode, which is essentially everything you need to know before you go. That is more geared towards people who, basically, if you're going to Florence, this is going to be a great episode. It's going to be very chill. We're going to be talking about some changes from the last time we went. We're going to be talking about some food that we enjoyed. We're going to be talking about some restaurants that we got the chance to try out. It's not going to be like a trip rundown necessarily. It's more just going to be a thoughts and impressions as far as, is it more crowded? Was it more empty? Et cetera, et cetera. Mm-hmm. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does to me. And this time that we went, we were able to explore a bit more across the river than we had before. So we know a bit more about those neighborhoods. And we're going to just kind of share some of the fun places that we went and the general vibes so that you can be prepared somewhat. But next week, we're going to get into more like transportation and I don't know, the nitty-gritty of
lodging,
yeah, exactly. The sort of nitty-gritty of generics, if that makes sense. The same that we did, very similar to what we did for a previous episode, which was Rome Condensed, right?
Yes.
It was called. So
like a couple of years ago, I think. To that. We might even update that one at some point. But until then, enjoy this episode. Before we get into that, just two pieces of news. One more fun, which is
Mount Etna erupted yesterday, Monday, June 2nd, 2025. It seems that everybody is okay. There was some concern that what is it called? The I'm going to say phosphorus. That's not what it is.
The pyroclastic sort of smoky ash.
Mm-hmm. That it is dangerous in general.
Oh, for sure, yeah.
But it seemed that it was not causing serious issues. So everybody seems to be fine.
And also, when I read it yesterday, at least, it looks like they didn't even shut down the airport in Catania, which I believe is their closest airport to Etna. So it seemed like either the wind was shifting away from it, but it doesn't seem, at least it basically doesn't seem like one of those things where it's like the sun has been blotted out. I say that because we're not that far from it in the sense of far, but not like if it was a huge eruption, I think we would see it. We would see it right. Or know about it.
And it did seem like the way the winds are moving, that everything was just kind of pretty quickly moving upward and not moving outward.
Yeah, so it was and I know nothing about volcanoes, so I don't know if this is one of those, when they say erupted, if it's just like a little belch, or if this was like a real eruption, I don't know, cinematic sort of eruption, but hey, kind of cool. If you're going to go hiking, I guess that is one of the sort of things to pay attention to, because there are some videos of hikers having to quickly scramble off the mountainside.
For those, when I read it, it was pretty close to whenever it had happened. I was reading the news, and they weren't able to, at that point, verify if those videos were real and up to date. Is that?
It looks like they were real and up to date.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean,
Cool.
in hindsight, given I don't know. That's a good question. I mean, like the ones that they were posted on news sites as if they were verified.
That makes sense. I mean, I think it happened at like 11:30 is when.
So maybe people are posting like straight to their Instagram.
And I think I read about it at like 12:30. So it seemed like news outlets hadn't had the opportunity to contact the people and be like, hey, when did you take this? We want to need to verify, blah, blah, blah.
And also, can we use it?
Right,
yeah.
For sure.
The other piece of news is not related at all and not nearly as fun. It's actually kind of more of a bummer.
It is a bummer.
And it goes it's an update to our previous piece of news, which is the citizenship decree. Very, very, very briefly, back in March, the Italian government passed a decree basically saying that they're closing the door pretty firmly to the whole jus sanguinis. Jus sanguinis? Yes, that sounds right. Which essentially was, as long as somebody in your family that was your direct ancestor was Italian at some point, in theory, you could reapply for citizenship. There were some caveats, there were some dates and timelines, et cetera, et cetera. However, that was possible. It was it's one of the few remaining European countries in which you could do that. In March, they passed a decree basically saying you had to be a parent or grandparent that was born and lived in Italy in order to apply, and even the way it's phrased is it's not like essentially if you're 60 now and you had a grandparent that was born in Italy, that doesn't count. I think it has to be a living grandparent. It's a very narrow crack in the door now, essentially. It's basically everybody who is American, South American. That's 95% of it actually is American and South American. I feel like so all the Italian diaspora who sort of escaped Italy or just left after the sort of famines and the droughts and this and that. They're essentially trying to be like, you don't come back. We're fine. As you can imagine, and I think some of you listening, in fact, it was one of our listeners who let us know about this decree because we didn't show up on any of our little news, little pings, our little notifications. And one of our listeners let us know because they'd already been like halfway through this process. And it's not an uncommon story where people are thousands of euros into this process, trying to get citizenship, and then only to find out, oh no, that's it, doors closed.
We know at least 2 other people personally who were in the process of doing this, at least were getting their paperwork together, and they've been affected by this, and it seems that they aren't going to be able to continue with the process at this point. You mentioned, whenever we were talking about this off mic, getting ready for the episode, you mentioned that some people, like some lawyers, were suggesting that depending on where you are in the process, talk to a lawyer and see if they can advocate for you and take your case to court, because if you're already really far into the process and you've spent tons of money and time and you're like just almost there, or anyways, wherever you are in the process, it seems that some Italian lawyers are saying, we can help you. We're going to try and fight this for you. Yeah. And like you said, it seems like some lawyers are also not personally taking it to court, but I don't know how.
But they are building. They're definitely building a case to bring it to constitutional court in Italy, because they're saying part of the constitution was to allow this, was allow people to reclaim, and now you're amending it. Fine, but it essentially is also a goodwill aspect to it. Like all these people who had applied under this idea that like, you'll be, once you do the paperwork, you're fine. There wasn't like once you've, there's no caveat for once you've started, you're still in. It was only once you've submitted your application, you're fine. But everybody else who'd been still hunting things down, out of luck, out of money. And of course there's the natural sort of, that was always a risk, you had to take, but a lot of people are like, hey man, I was in conversation with a comune or a city hall or a immigration office. Like they didn't give me a warrant. There was nothing. Mm-hmm. So a lot of people are feeling, I think, rightfully a bit like the rug was sort of, yanked out from underneath them kind of thing.
For sure.
And so that being said it's a bit of a bummer piece of news. And the advice is that, at least a lot of the advice I've been reading is essentially keep going anyway. If you have, especially if you have the money, if you're doing it by yourself, potentially try to find a lawyer, potentially try to fight it. A lot of lawyers seem to be willing to go to court to try to basically say, no, I have proof my client started this 2 years ago before there was ever a question. Even on this note though, on June 10th and 11th, I believe, is a vote. It's a little ballot, not ballot vote. I think it's something that's like referendum. There's some little referendums. And
I thought it was like the 8th and 9th.
8th and 9th? Is that what it is? Coming up. And again, this only concerns if you're Italian, but you already know. But this is just for those of you who are interested in ever becoming Italian, there's a referendum in which we are going to be voting on lowering the length of stay, the required amount of time you have to live in Italy on a residency visa before you can apply for citizenship, from 10 years to 5 years. Right now it's 10 years. It's one of the longest in Europe. Living 10 years in a place without being a citizen there is, for most of these countries, quite a while. Most of them, I think, are only 5 or fewer. And so it's going to be lowering it from 10 down to 5. However, a lot of experts and other political people in Italy don't think it will pass. And at the same time, waiting in the wings is another referendum that instead will go the other way and in fact increase the amount of time from 10 to 12 years. We've talked about this before, and this will be the end of my statement, but feel free to add on to it or counter it, is that Italy has constantly been saying, we need more people, and then closing the doors, systematically on all these other things. Like, if you live here for 10 years, you speak Italian, you pass this, you've been paying taxes, the whole 9 yards. Well, how about 12 years instead? Rather than going back down to 5. And if you have family here, well, unless they're currently living in your grandparent or parent, no. If you have a heritage connection to here, absolutely not. Just like door after door after door after door. And then they get surprised that people, like, I don't know. It's just one of those things. It's like, why are you shooting yourself in the foot
The
repeatedly?
Italian government wants something that they could never have. They
Yeah.
want, I don't mean to say this is going to sound kind of gross, but like pure blood
Yeah.
Italians who are heterosexual, who are young, willing to have lots of babies and live in a small town where they can probably never get a job.
And specifically, you mentioned small town just as a thing. It's only because so many of these things are like, try to stay where you are, stay in the small town, stay there. Don't go to Rome, don't go to Milan. Stay in these small towns where there is no work, where there is no hospital or anything like that. Sorry, just to interrupt.
But that's the thing too. They're taking away, like we've complained about this in some other episodes, but quickly, several hospitals around us have closed, and that puts more pressure on one single hospital for thousands and thousands, like tens of thousands of people, which is a far drive away. So you want people to have babies, but you don't provide the care for them to have those babies because you expect them to rely on their parents and grandparents, and it's a system that is outdated, is not working, and it doesn't make any sense.
It's a bit of a shame. And with that being said, we hope that you're going to enjoy your visit here when you come to Florence, and you're going to really have a blast. No, so that is, yes, no, it's just a bit of a bummer. So we hope that if you're going to come visit, at least you'll have a good time. And with that being said,
we know lots of people who don't agree with this thought and who are trying to vote for change and who are trying to vote for and keep people here, bring people here, be very open. So this is not we are grumpy about it. Lots of other people are grumpy about it, and lots of people are working to make Italy a more accepting place.
I think part of so the reason I've mentioned this too is I know that for some of you who have no connection to Italy, it's just like, Italy seems nice. But it's like a 50-50. I can go Italy, I can go Portugal, I can go Spain, To
live.
Yeah, to live. It's like, yeah, those places are, I think it's 5 years to live as a residency. It's so much, it just seems like they are on board with, if you want to move here, we'd love to have you. And Italy is just like, could you absolutely not move here? We have no interest in you living here ever. So, but it's still kind of fun to visit. So if you're listening to this for Florence advice, we have got you covered. And let's jump straight into, I guess, this Florence advice.
Yeah, absolutely. So here's the segue. Speaking of people coming here, coming to live, coming to visit, lots and lots of people are coming here, and therefore there's not really an off season anymore.
Great segue.
I feel it. Thank you so much. That's why I pointed out that it was a segue. I felt pretty proud of it. I think for a long time, it's been a classic tourist thing to talk about. Like, a tip is to go in the off season because there will be fewer tourists. More and more, there is no off season. The shoulder season is becoming smaller and smaller. And we say this because when we visited Florence in February, we knew we visited at the same time we went to Venice for Carnevale, and we knew Venice would be crowded because Carnevale is huge. We both thought that Florence was going to be more just local people, and it's a city, so it's going to be crowded anyway.
But also, if I may, part of that was because the hotel prices. We looked at like hotel prices in Rome, we looked at Venice, we looked at Bologna, we looked at Florence, because we were thinking like, well, we should not just go just for Venice, we should make a little trip of it. And we ended up in Florence because we found a hotel right next to the Duomo, within 15 feet of the Duomo for like 70 euros a night. So we're like, oh, it must be like deeply in the off season if we're getting this hotel for that cheap right next to the Duomo, and it's a decent room and the whole 9 yards. So I think that did color our opinion slightly, if I may interrupt and say that.
No, absolutely it did. And then we got there and it was packed with tourists. And we also noticed too that it seemed like university was getting back in session after the winter break. Florence has tons of universities. They also have lots of American and English speaking universities. So we heard a lot of young Americans who are very obvious because
Yep.
I feel like it's always been a thing is that Americans talk quite loudly.
Yeah,
And some Italians do too, but maybe, I don't know, our voices just carry.
There's also I will say there's a lot of Americanisms that you will notice in the sense of young college students, sweatshirts, big coffees, walking around, talking, sort of like a lot of Americans are on the phone or whatever it is. And it's not the same as an Italian who is not in a sweatshirt with their college name or walking with a coffee or something like that. There are those little things where you're like, I only say this too, again, there's so many people who say, how do I blend in? It's like walking and drinking or walking and eating are the two biggest things you could do to not blend in anywhere in Italy.
Walking and shouting on your phone, very Italian.
Very Italian. Yeah. Especially if it's like a medical condition. That is everybody.
Or if you're talking to your mom.
Oh my gosh. And you're like, Mom, I'm going. I'm leaving. Goodbye. Goodbye. Goodbye.
Everyone's always talking to their mom on
Yeah.
the phone.
Just say mom, mom. Everyone will assume
Mama.
you're Italian. They're like, oh, this person's Italian. That is a big one. And I think part of the reason we mentioned this too, I wanted to bring this up is one of the biggest questions I think that are searched for constantly and posted about on Reddit is when's a good time to go? Like if I can go at any time in terms of I can get time off at any point, when is a good time to go? It's on the off season. I know that Rome for the Jubilee, which is we'll talk about in a couple weeks, it's a big question because people know that it's supposed to be, I think like they had an average, it was supposed to be expected 35 million more people would come this year than in the previous year because of the Jubilee. Obviously that has dramatically changed with the new Pope in terms of like now people are coming for the Pope, it's a whole
even
thing.
More.
Exactly. So people are expecting crowded, and some of the posts are though like I was expecting body to body crowds. And while that's around like the Trevi Fountain, which as we've mentioned before is a very small little piazza in which the Trevi Fountain is located in Rome.
And anytime since COVID restrictions were lifted, it's that area is just packed.
But one or two streets away, plenty of space. And then, I mean, outside of like the historic district, you might see 5 or 6 people. It's like city, you might see a couple people, but you're not going to see tons. And so people are genuinely surprised. Like I went to Rome and I was like, it wasn't, I mean, it's crowded, but not like slam crowded. And then again, people talk about going to Venice, for example, and it is crowded, except again, we've talked about some of these side streets. So I wanted to mention that in terms of Florence is a city. So of course it's going to always be a city in terms of there'll always be activity. And at the same time though, there isn't really this off season, as you've just explained, that there used to be, or even a shoulder season. I think some people are like, well, I think even Italy is now calling it more shoulder season than off season because they're like, I mean, summer is wild, but then it's less wild now in spring and fall.
And I think if we're talking about recommending a time to visit, I would say almost anywhere the best time to visit is spring and fall because there are slightly fewer people, but the weather's going to be better. You might get more rainy days than you would in the summer, but being hot and exhausted is always not fun.
And we've talked about this so many times, and we probably will continue to say this, but Florence, Venice, Siena, Rome, all these old Italian cities, especially, which are like all Italian cities, they are zero trees, tons of stone. I mean, it really feels like you're walking in an oven. It is so hot and especially dry. And like Rome, not so much. It's more humid, but it can feel exhausting just being outside sometimes. And I say that coming from Savannah, where it's like 98 degrees days with 95% humidity is not outside the realm of normal for the summer. It's a pretty average summer day where you just are wet stepping out your door. And so going to Rome, it was just like, oh my gosh, all the stone makes this so much worse and there's no trees. And I think unfortunately Florence is like that. It is a hot city. So this was all to say, my little interjection here, I apologize, was all to say, if you are looking for I want to go someplace that had fewer people, February, cold, rainy, damp, weirdly, absolutely slammed. And while some of them were tourists, some of them, as you mentioned, were students. So it just felt like there was anywhere we went, it was like, wow, this is just kind of overrun with people.
Yeah, absolutely.
And if I may, sorry, one last thing. I was just thinking this off the top of my head. This isn't even a note. This is just me coming up with this in the moment. Is the fact that I will say, as an American, I look pretty American. I think some people assume German, but that's even worse because I don't speak any German. So if they default to English, at least I can be like, yeah, no, actually, good call. And I will say in Florence, I know that some of you are looking for an authentic experience, and I may be putting quotations around that. Florence can be difficult to find the authentic Italian experience because almost everywhere we went, people defaulted to English greeting us. There are so many Americans, and not even Americans. There are a number of French tourists. We're hearing French in line for restaurants and food.
I also heard quite a lot of German, speaking of
Quite
German.
a lot of Germans. So I think, but it was just everyone speaks some English enough to communicate. And I think so that would make sense. It was the default, I guess, since that was supposed to be the language everyone speaks, or whatever it is.
It's a pretty common language, yeah.
Yeah. And so I will say, if you're like, I really want somebody to greet me in Italian. I've been learning on the internet. I've been learning flashcards. I really wanted to talk in Italian. I really wanted to stress my Italian. Florence felt like the hardest place because people were like, I mean, politely, I speak better English than you do Italian. Can we just do this in English so I can get to the I mean, they didn't say that, but that was definitely the undercurrent of please just let me communicate in a language that we both understand.
Yeah. I will say, though, at the end of the episode, we're going to give some restaurant recommendations. And we speak Italian. And obviously, anytime we go to an Italian business, we're speaking in Italian. We speak to English. We speak to English. We speak in
Not
English.
Great. We speak to English.
I promise I speak English. Together, Nathaniel and I speak English. We don't talking Italian to each other. We should practice. But the point is, at the end of the episode, we're going to recommend some restaurants, and several of these restaurants and bars did speak primarily in Italian.
That is a very good point.
The ones that we're going to recommend.
A very good point. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So we also, I will say, just as a preemptive thing, is we do tend to, and I guess we'll get into this more, but we do tend to try to find the closest to what we're used to in terms of Italian isms. So it is very much not tablecloths and nice things. It's very much plastic tables and ashtrays. So, which again is kind of what we're used to in the South, where it's all plastic tables and ashtrays. So it's a bit of I think.
But you find the people who speak Italian, so I don't know. I trust it.
So, yes, it is basically, that was all to say, it is there. It is, if you're looking at Florence, if you're like, I mean, we're coming into the summer, so again, slammed. But there really isn't an off season. We saw massive lines around the Duomo, massive lines for the Accademia and the Uffizi. It looked like even the Ponte Vecchio, excuse me, totally spacing on that, was just body to body. So it was just wild.
We met February. Some friends, which was fun, and friends we weren't friends with them, and then we met them, and then we became friends.
We met strangers who became friends.
There we go. And we were talking to them briefly about mostly we didn't talk about their time in Florence. We were like talking politics essentially and culture. It was great. But they were saying that they went to the Duomo and they got there pretty early, like when it opened, but they still waited like a couple hours in line, right? And that was in February, like in the rain.
Yeah, it was.
So I can't imagine what it's going to be like now and going into the summer.
And part of that is because unless it's changed, and if it does change, we'll update it. But it didn't seem like it changed the last time we went, which is just in February of 2025. It is free to enter. There are tours associated with it that are not free, but part of the reason of the line is the fact it is free to enter. I think we've mentioned the Pantheon in Rome now costs money, and because it costs money, it is a bit of a shorter line. I think a lot of people just would go because it's like, it's free. You might as well check out the inside.
The Duomo in Siena costs money, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
But it's pretty close to Florence. And I feel like if you're visiting Florence, you might be visiting Siena. So.
And the Duomo in Siena, I think, is quite famous in terms of, I think it's like it's a thing that people are like, oh, you should go to there. Mm-hmm. So yes.
And it's the dome part that you can visit in Florence that costs money, right?
It's the tour up to the top, like up around the dome or up to the top of the dome. There's also one for the bell tower. If you're doing this, by the way, for what it's worth, if you're listening and you're like, oh, which one should I do? We have not done either. And everyone we've talked to recommends the bell tower because it is more interesting to see the dome from that height and the vista of the city than it is to be at the dome and see the bell tower, if that makes sense. It's kind of like you want to see the interesting thing, not the uninteresting. I mean, the bell tower is fascinating, but like you might as well be in the bell tower. It's a little cheaper and you get to see the dome from a nice distance of like whatever it is, 40 feet away, 50 feet away.
Yeah.
So that's just throwing that in there for a little spicy tip for y'all.
Okay. This one I have no segue for, so I'm just going to say it. Essentially, we've been across the river, like when you're in the main part of Florence. I shouldn't say the historic sort of tourist area of Florence is on one side of the Arno, the river. And and then the other side is wonderful and lovely. It's got what is it called? Pitti Palace?
Yeah.
Palazzo Pitti is on that side. And
the
then
gardens?
Yes.
Bomboli Gardens?
Yes, Boboli.
Boboli, thank you.
Boboli. It's a great word. As well as lots of cool restaurants and neighborhoods and interesting things. And we had more opportunity to visit over there this time. But we did want to let you guys know that if you're thinking about Florence compared to other Italian cities, so like Rome, big behind city, but there's a lot of public transportation and it takes about an hour to get anywhere in Rome,
really does.
as
it's wild.
Anyone will tell you. However, if you're lucky enough to get a seat on public transportation, at least you're sitting. You're chilling out while you go to your next location.
And arguably in air condition or heat, depending on the time of year you're visiting.
Exactly. Florence, the greater city of Florence has wonderful public transportation, but you can't really take it from the historic tourist sites to kind of anywhere else in the center of town that you're gonna go. So you're going to be walking a lot.
I will say it's kind of one of those things where, I mean, I'm sure like from like the Accademia, for instance, to the Ponte Vecchio, there's some sort of bus, but it wouldn't run straight there. It would run the long way around because one, buses can't really go through the historic area necessarily. Like they can on some streets and not on others, but the bus system is primarily designed for people who live in Florence to get into and out of the historic district,
right?
Not necessarily around the historic district, which is I mean, if you are, let me give you an example. I am, 6'4" or something, and 30-ish years old, pretty much on the dot 30. So it takes me about, I mean, a good thing is like reference in terms of like not a wingspan. What is that? Leg span, stride distance,
Yeah.
and youth and vigor. And it does take me about maybe 20 minutes to go from one side of Florence to the other side, or maybe 15 minutes from the Accademia down to Arno, the river, give or take.
Yeah.
So I say that it's really a kind of a small footprint for a city, not including
for the tourist area. Absolutely, it's got a small footprint, I would say.
And it's one of those weird things that when you walk from the train station into to the Duomo for the first time, it feels like a 25-minute walk for some reason, because you're like, where am I going? Where are we? And then, the Duomo. And the second time you do it, you're like, this is like a 3-minute walk.
Right.
But it's like that thing, I think, the first time you walk anywhere, you're caught in that little time tunnel of like, everything seems to take longer and the distances seem to be farther. At least it was for us, where I was like, there's no way we can walk back to the train station. Then I looked at it like, oh, it's a 5-minute walk. Right. I think we can do that.
And that's all to say that you may find yourself not wanting to cross the river if you're not going to the Pitti Palace, and you've already seen the Ponte Vecchio. You're not really interested in shopping there. You kind of want to stay in the main tourist historic center. Absolutely, I get that. There were times that after all the walking we did in Venice, even though I really wanted to go to a restaurant across the river, I was like, I can't. I'm not going to make it today. So it's just something to keep in mind. You don't need to force yourself to go over there, because it is a bit of a trek, and there is not a lot of convenient public transportation over there.
And if I may add, the one thing though, you mentioned the Pitti Palace and the Boboli Gardens.
I think it's Boboli, yeah.
Boboli. And there's also the Piazza Michelangelo, which is over there. It is a sort of a hill, with a parking lot on top. And it's a really beautiful spot, though. It's quite crowded, and it's a beautiful spot to see a sunset over Florence. If you've ever seen a photo of a sunset over Florence, it was almost certainly taken from that piazza. It also has a rose garden with a nice little I don't even know if it's a restaurant. It's not even a restaurant. It's like a little place to get drinks in this rose garden. It's very beautiful. It's very lovely. And I only mention that because there are some really beautiful, as we'll explain, some really lovely little quieter, interesting, maybe more authentic, to use that word, spots on the other side of the river. However, if you are in Florence for a limited time, I think it's safe to say you will not miss anything major by not crossing the river. Right. I mean, go on the Ponte Vecchio and then turn around and come back, but you're not like, oh my God, what did I miss?
If this is your first time in Florence and you want to see the museums, you want to see the sites, Ponte Vecchio, all the classic stuff, absolutely. I don't think you should feel forced to go to the other side of the river. If you've been to Florence before, or if you have a bit longer, I feel like also if you're like visiting your kids, if they're in university there, and you just kind of want to, I'm thinking of my parents, like if you want to get over there and just wander through some neighborhoods, super cool areas, lovely neighborhoods, really artsy, hip, but like not so hip that they're intimidating.
It's also, there's quite, I think you and I noticed, again, we spent a weirdly like 2 full days over there just wandering around. It's a lot more of a neighborhood, just in general. I mean, it is a neighborhood. Obviously, they're all various neighborhoods, but it very much felt like a neighborhood. And
you see like parents picking their kids up from school on bikes, and like it's just got a very, I don't want to say family, but
definitely more residential.
More residential,
family.
Absolutely.
There's definitely like the kid. There's a couple times like school let out over there, or the people were kind of coming to and from mass, or it just felt more like, oh, this is actually where people live, and not necessarily where people are just here like to go to school or whatever.
Right. I think the sort of where a lot of tourists are going to see the historic center, it's obviously got a lot of tourists, and a lot of the people that you see there are working, like they live in Florence, but they're working. So it's kind of got like a business center vibe.
Absolutely.
Where the other side of the river has people just living their regular neighborhood lives.
Yeah. Which again, this I think plays into more if you're looking, depending on if you're looking for hotels or Airbnbs, I think more hotels in the touristy area, more Airbnbs in the more residential area. Obviously we often not encourage Airbnbs specifically, because if it's in a residential area, it's probably better that the Airbnb go towards, housing for people who live in the area kind of thing. But that's just us and our silly little ideas. But it's also, I think we'll bring up a little later, but it's also where a lot of restaurants tend to be. Like a lot of more, again, not authentic or cheaper for sure, but certainly more just like, oh, this might be where people who live in Florence go to eat.
Yeah,
because I think there's a vibe of a lot of the ones in Florence specifically where either you were there working and you're eating, like clearly business people, because they were like all in their suits and stuff, and they just were stopping for a quick bowl of pasta, or tourists like us who
For
are
sure.
eating there.
Exactly. And like you said, yeah, we're going to get to that at the end of the episode. So let's talk about no transition here, leather goods.
I think it's a perfect transition. Are you hungry? You cannot eat leather. Let's talk about leather goods.
I think you can in
I guess, right?
like a starvation situation. I think you could.
People talk about eating the leather shoes, but that seems rough.
Yeah, I don't think it's
I mean,
recommended.
It's not like recommend. Okay, fair enough. Yeah. Okay.
So we want to bring this up because obviously Florence, well, maybe not obviously, but Florence is known for leather. Historically, it's been known for a long time for its leather goods. And there are two leather markets, right, that are sort of open air in the
A minimum,
sort of
yeah. I
center.
think there's a few others, but there's like two major, not major, but like one major one slightly less major one.
Okay, there are at least two that are like pretty well known, well trafficked.
Yes, for sure.
And there's also at least one leather school, and they are a bit different. So I think we've talked about this before, but we just want to go over this again. That the outdoor leather markets, it seems we have been told this, and we kind of put our eyes on it whenever we've been there. They have become a bit less made in Italy. Does that make sense? A bit less handcrafted in Italy. So it's just a warning. I don't know anything about leather. I don't really know how to spot a well-made leather, like good quality leather bag. So I wouldn't shop necessarily in the open air leather markets because a lot of those stalls are not made in Italy. They're made somewhere else. They might not be made with good working practices, things like that. I'm not going to be able to spot that. So I would buy my leather goods at the leather school, which is the Scuola di Cuoio, I believe. Yeah, Scuola di Cuoio. It is a bit more expensive, but at least I know that I'm getting something that was made there. And you can see people, there's a really cool hallway if you go into the Scuola di Cuoio, where the little artisans have essentially little desks. They can't make all of their goods at these tiny desks. I think it's a bit more for show, but it's cool because you can see them working and it's really neat. And then they have a shops kind of along that, well, not shops, rooms along that hallway where you can buy certain goods from different artisans, and then sort of a main what would you call that?
Showroom,
yeah, where you can.
They also have, I think, underneath. Things. We just stared through the windows because we're creepy, and we did not realize that this was not part of what you're supposed to be looking at. I think and we were like trying to find the entrance. It's like it's a weird thing. It's like upstairs in an old church or something, and I think below is definitely where they make it because there were a lot more like industrial machines. And a lot of
big like working tables and things. Yes.
And I think upstairs at the desk, there were some machines, but it was more like, oh, that's where they do like the final touches. Mm-hmm. If I may very briefly though, go back, I just wanted to kind of go back to what you said about the leather things. I say this too, because I know that, I mean, like I have family who's come to Florence for, I mean, not 4 years, but like who came in like the late 80s, early 90s and talked about it. And it's been Fiorentini mm-hmm. will tell you that like the leather markets haven't really been like authentically Italian leather in quite some time. And when I say quite some time, I mean some joke like it hasn't been like since 1850, some joke since 1950, like post World War II. It's kind of a toss up. I think the Scuola di Cuoio, I think it's a post World War II school, and that was, if I'm not mistaken, they have a whole thing about it inside, and that was created in response to the fact that there was a dying amount of leather workers in Florence. Like we're famous for leather work, but we don't have talented professionals working in Florence anymore. We're outsourcing to other cities or other countries even. And I say that because this is not like I say that for instance, my mother came here in the 90s and talked about how much leather, and even then she was like, I don't know like how much is like actually Italian leather though, because it's the same kind of things like backpacks and shoulder bags and duffel bags and jackets, and you're like, these are all made here. And
if you have a keen eye, I will say, if you have a keen eye and you've walked around enough, especially if you've been in more than one city, you'll start to see not replicas, but things that look identical to each other in lots of different shops. And you can start to tell what is very likely not made in Italy and what was mass produced in a factory somewhere in some other country.
I will also add too, and some of you already know this, so then you're already pre-warned and pre-prepared, or just regularly prepared. Made in Italy is I think it's just for Italy. I'm not sure if it's every country. I think it's an EU law though, not an Italian law. But as long as the last significant change was made to a product in Italy, it can be made in Italy. there is some confusion as to what that might mean. For some people, it's just if you put a button on a jacket that is now made in Italy, even if the jacket itself was made in India or China or Bangladesh or something like that, if you put like a final touch on it, that is considered the last major sort of change to the jacket, because obviously a jacket without buttons isn't a jacket. Hello, it's just a bathrobe. I have no idea of what the argument is there, but I say that too because sometimes it's like a zipper on a bag, or it's a strap on a bag, or it's, some people claim, and these I think people tend to be more, like I say this, I want to say some people, I mean, if you go to the markets in Italy, especially the used clothing markets, you're going to see a lot of clothing that's made in Italy. And you're going to be like, wow, this is a lot, I think must have a lot of like made in Italy stuff. A lot of the people there will claim that no, they just sew the label on in Italy and consider that the last major change made in Italy. It's actually not drop shipped, but like factory made in China typically. They buy a bulk of it and they get it shipped. There's also a lot of claims, and then those claims are kind of backed up with proof of like sweatshops in northern Italy as well. So I say that in the sense that you might honestly find genuinely a true traditional leather goods stall. And when, as you mentioned before, especially if you're really looking, you'll start to notice that everybody's like, oh, everybody has that jacket shape, or everybody has that bag shape. And I say it's like 4 or 5 people have the same thing. And then it kind of starts to where you're like, oh, okay, maybe this isn't necessarily as authentic. Again, this might not matter that much if you're just looking for more of a little thing to bring back, like a souvenir. There's the word. If you're looking kind of just, I just want a souvenir, something from my time in Italy, something from my time in Florence. It doesn't have to be a $500, $600 leather backpack. It just could be
of course,
$100, $50. I don't know what the price would be. Leather backpack. Then that is genuinely a good, an option. Basically, it's a totally valid option. I think a lot of those are also, not all of them, but a good portion of them are what's called genuine leather. Something else we looked into because we were curious. It is a quality of leather when you basically take leather scraps.
The lowest quality.
The lowest quality, yeah. You take leather scraps, you blend them together, and then you, with glue essentially, and then it kind of creates a paste fabric-y leather essentially piece. And so when it's a genuine leather, it's actually quite low quality versus something like there's like the vegetable tan full hide and the vegetable tan so-and-so. And that's, I think, what these, there's not just the leather school, of course, there are other smaller productions, but I will say it's the difference between a $10 wallet and like a $50 wallet. I think I really wanted something from the leather school, but even the little it's like
a card holder.
It just holds cards. I think they're like 30 euros. And I was like, I really want one, but
which is fair,
I have one,
but yeah.
And I don't want another one for 30.
Yeah.
So that's all to say. And actually, I will say a listener of ours did reach out and let us know that on our episode about bartering and negotiating, that you can actually negotiate. She's had success negotiating with, or haggling, I think, maybe bartering. Yeah. Not bartering. You're not giving them anything but money. You're not like, how about I toss in some stuff, No, but I think negotiating, haggling.
Yeah.
Haggling sounds so much worse than negotiating. I feel
know.
Whatever you do for a new car when you're there and you're like, oh, you want 22? Bargaining, maybe.
Is that it? Anyways, yeah.
She's had success bargaining at these leather markets in Florence. So if you are there and you are wanting to try out your negotiating techniques and tactics, I think that would be a place to do so.
Yeah, for sure. Try it out.
Absolutely.
And so speaking of little things to take home with you, little souvenirs, I will say that Florence is a great place for finding artisan made things in shops around Florence. I will put in the description some streets where I've noticed a lot of these shops. I don't have any specific recommendations, but they're just streets that Nathaniel and I have walked up and down where I find myself gazing in windows and picking things out for myself that I never end up buying usually. But I will say that Florence is a great place for locally made artisan fun little things like jewelry and little glass things, and like you said, leather. And it's not big on ceramics necessarily, but just fun little things like something to put on your mantle, a little memento of your trip. Great place for that. And also there's obviously the Ponte Vecchio has fancy shops where you can get things from fancy jewelers and glass things and little tchotchkes. So cool.
Those seem to be like actual, I mean, some of those are like real stores. I don't know, but I mean, they're all real stores. But I'm saying like that's like the Omega watch or whatever it is. It's always,
some of them are larger brands, and some of them are, I think, smaller production. But also I have to say that I always thought the Ponte Vecchio had like every piece of jewelry was like thousands of dollars worth of jewelry, but some of it is more affordable than that. I will say some of it was like in my price range where it's like, 50 to 100 euros, you know?
Yeah, and for something kind of like small, but not necessarily knick-knacky, if that makes
Right,
sense. Like,
yeah.
oh, that's a nice little piece of, whether it's a brooch or a set of earrings or a bracelet or something. It was like, oh, that's actually really nice. Because I say that because sometimes there's like, I think the only times things are cheap or just like nobody knows what to do with it. It's like a knick-knack. It's like, do I put it on my mantle? I don't know. Like, do I just have it?
Like those little glass animals.
Yeah, exactly. Those
which are so fun.
Which are really cute. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm like, is it a paperweight? I don't know what it is, but it's, and I mean, I feel like we have stuff like that. It's just never, like, we have like one little coffee table that's just filled with the little knickknacks we've bought. So yeah, no, the Ponte Vecchio is also a kind of great place to find stuff.
Okay, so we've moved now into the food portion
You
of
cannot
the episode.
eat jewelry. There's no segue. We really should have segued this better.
If you're walking across the Ponte Vecchio, you might want to try out
Lovely. 10 out of 10.
yeah. So do you want to talk about which side of the river do you want to talk about
Let's
first?
talk about the far side of the river.
The far side of the Arno.
Yeah.
I don't know
Ooh,
why I
that
got
sounds good.
British there.
Well, I'm sure somebody said that in a British accent once.
Okay, so let's talk about the other side of the Arno, which if you're walking from the Ponte Vecchio, you might be walking towards the Palazzo? No.
Pitti Palace?
Pitti Palace? How do you say palace in Italian?
Palazzo.
Palazzo?
Palazzo dei Pitti.
Okay, there we go. I thought so.
It's the south side, by the way. We keep saying other side, other side. If you're looking at a map, it's the south side.
Southwest, right?
Well, yeah, but I mean like south of the river instead of north of the river.
Sure. But the river goes diagonally. We just paused to check the map, and I was wrong. It is very much north and south. In my mind, it had much more diagonal trajectory.
It's a jaunty north to south, if we're being honest. It's not very stretto.
Yeah, but we can definitely think about it as the south side of the river. So we're walking across the Ponte Vecchio, going towards the Pitti Palace, and about a 5-minute walk from the Pitti Palace to the west. There we go. I know directions. To the west is a really cute little piazza. It's called the Piazza Santo Spirito. And we just want to mention it because as we were wandering around, we found some cute places. And this piazza has several different bars, which, as we always say, doesn't mean you have to get an alcoholic drink. It's coffee, it's juice, it's water, bubbly water, sodas. It's all the stuff. Great place to hang out. Really interesting kind of grouping of like, there's like a hipstery kind of bar, and then like what looks like sort of the retiree bar, and then there's sort of, I don't know, just a bar generic. You know, it's a really cute area. There was at least one musician set up when we went through there.
I think there's some sort of fountain in the middle there.
I think it's a well or a fountain.
Well? Oh, it might have been a well.
Okay.
Yeah.
Anyways, just a really cute little area if you're over there and you're looking for a place to hang out.
And again,
Super
this
cute.
is, if I may, just like this, these are really, these were all base suggestions. I get this is where I should have put the earlier part. I'll put it now. These are all suggestions in that which we have found places to be the most like other, more Italian culture and less geared specifically towards tourists or towards Americans specifically. So it felt more like, oh yeah, this is how it looks in other parts of Italy rather than this is just literally how it looks here. This is kind of weird and feels very like, I say this because like a lot of things are going more Instagram friendly or TikTok friendly or American friendly because that's where I think Italy, like a lot of countries, still have the idea that American tourists are very well moneyed. So there's this idea that, you know, when you are attracting tourists to your restaurant and or bar, you attract Americans before anybody else. And so we say this too, just because when we say it's cute, it's like it is actually genuinely a cute little area, and it's great. Like you're not gonna necessarily feel like, oh, I'm really in Florence, but I think in this Piazza Vittoria, you said Piazza.
Let me check my notes. Piazza Santo Spirito.
I could not have been more wrong. Piazza. Good Lord. Piazza. Okay. Good. Amazing how bad that was. And I was like, wow, I think I got that on the first try. Not even close. I think that's what's making
you
it
shot
so
your
funny.
shot.
I did. I gave it a full effort. And no, we think it's like all of these. It's just kind of a nice little vibe of like, yeah, this is what Italy is like. It'll be a nice little trip. Or at least we hope that you find the same way. Because I think when we went there, we're like, oh, this is kind of cute. And this is like a little bit of a neighborhood and a little bit of a, I don't know, there's a sensation that, you know, and as we'll mention with some of these too, and we'll mention specifically that, oh, kind of the same people come to the same bars. So it has a bit of a worn-in kind of like feel, not worn out, but like oh, this is a comfortable place for people, which is nice.
Absolutely. Yeah. And speaking of Piazza Santo Spirito, if you take Via Santo Spirito, and then that's going to turn into Borgo, I think sorry, I'm reading. Let me just make sure I say this word right. Borgo San Frediano. Frediano is a hard word to say.
Yeah, it really is.
So that is all in this neighborhood. I think it's actually linking two different small neighborhoods on that side. But if you take that street, it's got a lot of those shops that I was talking about. It also has quite a lot of antique shops and antique
really
stores
does,
on that
yeah.
side of the river, which is really cool to see. Just a neat.
And I think we've mentioned this before, though. I will say, this is a broad generalization. Italy is not as interested in antiques as I think like Scotland felt very interested in antiques. Like there's felt like a lot of like used stores and antique stores. I've heard that England is the same way. America,
I think
obviously.
France is big on antiques.
France is big on it, like the attic sales. And I say that because one of the biggest things coming to Italy is a lot of antique shops, especially in the South, are sort of like, I mean, they're not doing anything to prevent like mold or like.
It's like somebody's garage half the time.
Exactly.
You have
It's
to
like,
call them and they open it up and they have, it's not an association, but they have like a business license, but they don't really run the business. They kind of just have a garage full of antiques.
and I think in the States, it's like especially when you buy a house, so you're maybe renting or not for the first time, but like you want like certain I say buy a house specifically because it's like that's where you really want to start getting stuff in there that like this is nice. And I mean, I don't know, maybe I just watch like a lot of HGTV, but there's always like they always go to before they go to the new store, they always go like, let's get that. I don't know, that was big on the famous one with the Magnolia channel. What are those people called?
Yeah, Joanna
Yeah,
with
Chip
her
Gaines,
shiplap. Yes.
right? Is it something
Joanna and
Fixer
Chip.
Upper? Is it just called Fixer Upper or something?
Maybe, yeah.
And that was, I think, a show they often go and get like that one or two pieces from their storehouse, their warehouse. But they're used, they're vintage, they're old. They're like, we want to kind of build around this. And I think a lot of shows have a similar thing where it's a couch or it's a bed frame or it's a ward, just something like historic, something with some interesting weight to it. And I think Italy, and I know this. Weirdly, we have like 6 architect friends and all of them complain about the fact that everybody wants new. And it's like not necessarily new and nice. It's like I want an IKEA kitchen and I want an IKEA living room, which is fine. Obviously, it's fantastic. It works. It's like, but we're surrounded, like you have like your grandparents' old dining room table. It's solid wood. It's gorgeous. And like, yeah, I really cannot wait to get rid of that.
Right.
And so it is a bit of a bummer. And I will say the fact that Venice has such a appreciation maybe for it, or at least they're paying attention to it. It really felt kind of special in terms of like, wow, you guys at least. And again, this is like in the South, especially. I don't know in Milan or in Torino, it might be different, but it very much felt like in Rome, it felt kind of the same. Like you didn't really find antique stores like again in the States.
There were some, definitely more than there are around us, but it's still felt like there was a sense of new is better.
Yes, and I think in the States they're all smell like wood polish and like brass polish. Like, so you go into an antique store and you're like, oh, you guys like take care of your antiques. This is kind of cool. And then here it was like, oh, it smells like something is like rotten wood, basically, which is fine, I guess. So
along that street, you can find antique
let's talk
shops.
about food now. Let's talk about rotting wood.
Antique shops, lots of cool, interesting places to pop into. And I mentioned this street also because there's a bar that when we made our new friends, we happened to go for drinks in this bar. And I just wanted to mention it. I think this word might be French. I don't speak French, but in Italian, it's probably pronounced la cité or la cité in French.
Le
Cite. I'm sorry, French people, please don't come at me.
La cité.
We mention it because it's quite cute. We're multilingual, the people behind the bar, and it's got a artsy, hipstery vibe.
And a loft space. I think they usually have some sort of live music. It seemed like a really interesting, nice little, like kind of a fun, younger. I seem to lean a bit younger and a little bit maybe more. I think I heard English like around more than other. I mean, there were other languages for sure, but it was like,
it was fairly international though.
Yes.
We heard not just English, but other languages that weren't Italian as well.
But it was kind of fun. Of the bars, that one felt like the most just international, least Italian, maybe arguably,
definitely.
which I think was their intent. Their intent was to create like an international space.
Absolutely. And speaking of bars, this might have been one of our favorite finds, the places that we'd been. What are words? We went to this place for the first time and I was excited.
Love it. Perfect. That was a beautiful thesis statement.
Thank you. So this place is called Circolo Rondinella del Torino. And it is essentially, there are things here that are associations, and it's almost like it's not a group of friends, but it's a group of people who've gotten together to create a club for some reason. And
Mostly playing
circolo.
Card games and drinking.
Yeah. And so this is one of those, they're called a circle. Circolo. Anyways, this is one. And we saw it on Google Maps. I was tired. I needed to sit. it was a whole thing. So I found this on Google Maps, and I was a bit worried that it was going to be like a private association, because sometimes they are. We have them here where it's, again, just in someone's like living room essentially, and they're like, I'm sorry, I can't let you in, this is my friend's living room. But this one was not
you have to
that.
pay dues to come into my friend's living room.
Right. So this one it's an outdoor sort of garden space. I will warn you, it has, I think, AstroTurf.
It definitely has
is part of it,
fake grass.
and the tables are plastic.
And
However,
there are ashtrays.
And there are ashtrays. Of course there are. We're in Italy.
Yeah.
But once you get past that, it's right along the river. It's beautiful. You can see the north side of Florence. It's got an incredible view. It's under big trees. It's wonderful. Cheap drinks and coffee. If you go inside, so we went and asked the people who are working, we're like, hey, we just wandered in. Is this like public? And they were like, of course.
Yeah.
What do you want to drink? Like,
yeah.
what can we get you? And they were really lovely.
It also, I will say inside, because we both were like, oh, it is super dingy in here. This is an interesting, like maybe, again.
Like a hole in the wall kind of.
Yeah, very hole in the wall. And then I think we got wine, and it was some sort of jug of like a random glass jug of wine. And we were like, is this like a local production, or is this just like you guys went and got the $2 wine from the grocery store and put it in a glass bottle to make it look cuter?
And who knows? But it was great.
But and that was one of those ones though that was all Italians, all outside, we're not tons of us obviously, but it was just very much this is where the neighborhood comes in.
Absolutely.
Drinks.
And I will say, so we were sitting all outside in February. It was a sunny day. We were in jackets. It was totally fine, really lovely. And it was not terribly crowded. There were certainly people there, but there were tables open. I will say, having looked at photos on Google, it seems that in like the sunnier, nicer parts of the year, it does get quite crowded.
Yes.
But it's really lovely. And all these places that we're mentioning, we will put
in the description.
In the description, we're going to put exactly
this
what they
also
are.
had like kind of an interesting floral garden, which I guess a lot of gardens are floral.
Yeah, but if you went, basically it's the part where you can sit has a bit of a gate, so you're not going to like fall off into the river. But if you go sort of towards where like the bathrooms are, they had like a fun little garden area, and then at a certain point you can just wander off to the riverside.
Well, there's supposed to be like going home, and they just went down the embankment to the river, and they're just walking along the river.
I was a bit worried for her. She just walked on off into the distance.
Because it was like mud and grass, and I was like, oh, that's a thing. We also saw a duck eat a spear of fish and then eat the fish whole.
It was crazy.
I'd never seen before. I've never seen a duck use its beak though. Like it was a weird duck, but it was a spear-billed duck. Well, it wasn't like it was flat-billed duck. It had a little spear for a mouth, and it was just, and it stabbed a duck at a fish, and it ate the whole thing. It was wild, y'all. That was insane. I don't know. Maybe that was why.
Highlight of your trip.
It really. I was just kind of blown away. And then it ate it as if it didn't just eat this whole fish, and then it was just like having a day now. I'm like, just blown away. I'm so lost now. I apologize. I've completely lost the rail. Yeah.
Duck. Okay. One more bar that I want to mention, because we happened into it while we were waiting for dinner at this really cool restaurant that we're going to talk about in a second. And it is called Fuor di Porta, which is outside the door. Again, great, just like little neighborhood bar.
This was more of a wine bar, if I may just throw in there. It had
definitely a wine bar, not a coffee bar.
Yes. Yeah. I didn't think, I imagine they have coffee. It'd be weird if they didn't, only because this would be crazy.
I don't know that they did. They didn't have an espresso machine.
Oh, I assume they had like the little like single packet. Okay. Because it has like a, I don't know, it sounds worse when you say boxed wine, but a lot of it was like, some of it was in boxes, some of it was in like kegs, but like the little bigger containers kind of thing. Essentially, it was clearly they buy it in bulk and then sell it. You don't get, it's not like a bottle or you get a glass, but it's from a larger, I think it was a box.
Some of them are like casks. They had like barrels for some of them, but then some of them were just boxes. Yeah,
because I think a lot of people like ship their like it'll be a bag of wine inside of a box. I mean, you guys know what box wine is. What I'm talking about.
Nice quality. It's not. Yeah. It's not. I feel like the U.S. is just coming to the point where we have somewhat decent quality wine in boxes, but in other parts of the world, there is some really nice wine that is also shipped in a box.
Well, I think it's because in the States we don't have. When you go to a bar and you get like something on tap, it's always beer. Right. Almost always beer, I should say. And here, it's quite frequently you will find wine on tap, and they are coming. Sometimes they'll come out of kegs, as you mentioned, but sometimes it'll be literally a box because it'll be cheaper to ship it in a box than a metal keg.
And other times it's very large. I think they're specifically wine containers, but like this very large metal barrels.
Yeah, kegs, right?
Sure. Is that a keg?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Or like a half keg instead of a full keg or whatever.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
And we had some lovely vino alla spina, which is wine from the tap.
Yeah.
which sounds like it's coming out of the sink.
I mean, in Italy.
And it was lovely though. We really enjoyed it because it felt like a bunch of friends were hanging out with the owner who was friends with them. They were chilling. They were having some chips. When they had some chips, he offered us some chips. It was great.
It's like I think we went to get a bag of chips like to have with our wine, and he's like, no, and he gave us like chips that were already open or something.
Yeah.
It was again that
you
sort
don't
of,
need to pay for those. Just we're eating.
Like, don't
you
be
have
silly.
some of our chips.
Yeah.
And it was great. And it often felt like it's not like we were so special. We were the only ones there.
God, no.
It was definitely like a bunch of people from the neighborhood were coming. They knew the owner. They were all chilling at a big table sort of just behind us, and we didn't know them, so we weren't sitting with them.
Yeah.
So we were off to ourselves, and occasionally other couples would kind of come in and out, but it just felt like a very neighborhoody, friendly place. It was great.
And I think of the 3 times we went, it was at least 2 or 3 people there. We're like, oh, they were here last time, and it was kind of like, oh, because it was clearly like I don't know. For me, it's not necessarily the best. Like obviously, because I mean, if you think about it, and listener, if you think about like where you tend to frequent, it might not be the best place around.
Right.
It's just the one that's the most comfortable for you, or that you feel, I don't know, you feel comfortable, you feel at home, you feel special. Maybe you feel like you can you don't have to act or put on airs. And I think sometimes when we go to places, when we go visit other parts of Italy, especially, and we keep seeing the same people in the same area, like the same bar, it's kind of like, oh, this must be the same thing. Like that to me is better to try out than one where it always has a line out the door and it's always different. I mean, for food, that's one thing, but like, I don't know, sometimes it's like you kind of want to check the comfortable one, try out.
Absolutely.
Like what's like the local haunt, I guess.
And I will say, if you're not looking for that, along that street, again, next to the restaurant that we're going to tell you about in a moment, there are lots of wine bars. In fact, all along, I've now forgotten what I told you it was called, but
Santo Spirito, or the other one?
Santo Spirito that turns into San Fredino?
Something.
Fred something.
Freddie. Freddie Mercury Street.
We'll put it in the description. But really, all along that street are wine bars. And lots of things that are a bit more upscale, a little more curated than this one that we're talking about now. This is just what Nathaniel and I like. Like you said, you don't have to put on airs. It's a really relaxed space. You're just having a quick, cheap glass of wine.
And I think part of this too is, and I've gone on too long about this and we have other things to talk about, but it's also, I think I often find myself like socially nervous or anxious in certain situations in terms of like, should I sit? Should I stand? Should I order this? Should I order and then sit? Should I sit then order? Like I never know the operations, and sometimes I feel like I don't know. It's like you walk into a nice place and I'm like, I didn't know this is a nice place before coming in here. Like I could have gotten ready a little bit. Like I didn't get, there's a little bit of, there's always these things in my head, but then sometimes you walk into a place, and not this place specifically, but like it has plastic tables or it had, there's this certain area and you're like, oh, everyone's welcome here. This is perfect. I love this place. Let's just, no one care. It's just like if people stare at you, it's because they're curious, not because they're judgmental kind of thing. Not that people are judgmental, but it's just like sometimes you walk in a nice place and you're like, I didn't realize this was nice.
Right.
I'm wearing shorts and like a t-shirt. I misread the energy outside. I'm so sorry. And I think then you get kind of stared at for like, why are they wearing shorts and t-shirt in a nice place? I don't know.
For sure. So this is not that. This is a chill place.
Very chill.
So this restaurant that I have been alluding to is called Trattoria. What? Trattoria Sabatino. That's where I got the O from. Trattoria Sabatino. It is very well known. This is not like some hot secret.
No, this is
spot.
a very cold secret. Well, not cold, but it's the opposite of a hot tip. Cold piece of information.
But it is a hot restaurant.
Yeah.
Lots of people know about it.
Very famous.
It is very famous. It is like home cooking, essentially.
Yeah.
And it's amazing. You described it off mic as a bit. What would you say about the decor?
I don't know. Was it good? Kitschy. Oh, I think in a good way. Yeah, in a friendly way. I will say as a couple things too. One, Florence in general has an earlier dinner time. And we've talked about this before. In the south, it's like 9:30, 9. In the north, it's like 7:30, 7. In this case, I think it opens at 7?
7:15.
7:15. So like true Italians, the first time, that's not true. We were told to go early. Mm-hmm. So we got there at like 6:30 and it was closed. And we're like, well, that was terrible advice. So we went to have a drink at this bar and we got back at 7:15 and it was like, oh, and there's like 35 people outside and they're all waiting to get in because it hadn't opened yet. There is a set menu. In the sense of every day there's a new menu, you have to choose from something on the menu. Not like you have to choose everything on the menu. It's not like it's not like a Michelin star restaurant. You have to get the full menu. It's just, it's like every day it's a different set menu. That makes sense?
I think there's a daily menu. I wouldn't use the term set menu
okay.
because you could,
Daily,
you
yes.
can, yeah, you can choose individually what you want.
That's much better. Yeah, it is a daily menu. Yes, and it is a bit kitschy. And it's a little bit like I love the sense that they like, again, this is the sort of like, it's Italy. They don't know what a warm bulb is. A lot of it was cold bulbs. Like, it was a very like, oh, that's a very cold light that you're eating by, and some of the lights are missing from some of the fixtures, and it was just like,
but it had like antiques on the wall, and like I think there was a wagon wheel on the wall,
exactly,
and like baskets, and their grandma's antiques and things that they were just on the wall. But it was almost for me like what I, as an American, would expect from like a stereotypical Italian restaurant.
Yeah.
And I loved that about it. It was kitschy and wonderful. And like you said, you do have to get there early. So they serve lunch and dinner. Lunch, they're open from 12 to 2:30, and then dinner, they're open from 7:15 to 10. So it does seem like they only get in like 1 to 2 seatings per night, and you should get there, I would say, at least 30 minutes before they open. Yeah,
I think it's safe.
sure.
Yeah, 6:45 or so, or whatever it is for lunch. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's great. I mean, it's not like the best food you're ever going to eat, but it is certainly
That's
like
fair, yeah.
home cooked food and a very homey vibe, in that like it kind of seems like a family running it.
Oh,
like,
for sure.
Like two grandmas.
Yeah.
And the two grandmas are a bit gruff. Like, they're not mean, but they really want you to know what you want by the time they get to your table, because they have stuff to do,
That was I will say that was it's giving away the other part of it, but is that the people around us were like, oh, and then when like, I'll order the next part when I come back, and she's like, I'm not coming back.
Yeah.
So it's now or it's never. And then she went to us. I'm like, I'm ready. You want to go? We can. I have everything. I'm ready to go. I'm so prepared.
And it's cool because it has communal tables. That's the word. Yeah. So one night we went there and we were sitting with another young couple who were Italian, and they were very polite and shy and didn't want to talk to us. I think they were just like, oh, we're going to let them have their own night. Super polite, lovely little.
I think they were like a date
people.
night kind of thing. So we're like, I don't want to.
I think we were like, oh, we shouldn't talk to them. They're on a date. And they were like, oh, we shouldn't talk to them. They're on a date. No, but they were lovely. And you end up sharing like, the grated cheese or whatever it is they put on the table. And I think we ordered something. They were like, oh, that's really good. Actually, can we have, what they're having? It was really sweet. And then another night we went and we met these aforementioned friends, and we ended up chatting with them and just sitting with them on purpose. But the point is that if you're probably 2 or 3 people or one person, you're going to end up being sat with another group of people. You don't have to talk to them, but it is a communal table.
There was a 6 top, like a table for 6, and it was one person sitting by themselves, and then a group of 5 joined that person by themselves. And I was kind of like, oh, that's interesting. Like, not in a bad way, because they didn't really cross interact. Basically, it wasn't like the group of 5 was like, hey, you're by yourself. Do you want to join our conversation? So it just felt like the person that was just eating by themselves at a table with other people. So it can create like kind of really interesting conversations. We met these friends, had a lovely time, and as we looked around, I think some people were in that vibe of like, yeah, this is what I wanted. And other people were like, please don't talk to me. And I will say too, again, there were plenty of, as you mentioned, like the 2 sort of older grandmother figures kind of running the restaurant. It felt like it was clearly there was some locals or some like mainstay figures in there that weren't like, they kind of had their own table. Like they, didn't wait in line necessarily. And they kind of got, and I was like, that's kind of neat. And I think it was, again, you mentioned too, the food was good, not like, I mean, it's not like Michelin star blow you away, but it's if you are looking for like what do Italians eat at home, or what are like, I mean, even the small things like, they have a little like, oh, you can get a cheese plate, or you can get a sausage plate or sausage and cheese plate. You're thinking it might be cute, comes with some grapes or something. No. It's literally slices of cheese on a plate. Here you go, or slices of sausage on a plate. It's very much how you'd be treated at somebody's house in a good sense, like
right.
Not necessarily putting on airs, but you're gonna. I mean, it's also, I will say, it was wildly cheap.
It's so cheap, y'all. That's one of the reasons we went, because we are on a budget, and it was incredibly affordable.
Like, I think it was like €5 for a plate of pasta. It was closer, under 10 for most of the meat, and then I think they always had dessert every night, and then I think the vegetable sides were in a few euros. So, which is normal prices for the South, I will say. Like, that's pretty standard in the South, but in Florence, where most pasta dishes were like 10 to 15, seeing a pasta dish for 5, we're like, wow, 5, we should definitely try this out to see if it's like good. And it, I mean, genuinely, like the ravioli and stuff, I mean, it was actually like, oh, you guys are making this here. So
yeah, absolutely.
It's if you don't mind waiting a bit in line. And I will say that the reason I want to mention to the whole thing about dinner times and stuff is frequently you will be told you can't really wait, like in the sense of like, people say, it's 8 o'clock now. You can't wait till our next seating because we're going to be closed by then. So, because we're not forcing anybody out. We're not, speeding up their eating. It's nothing like in the States, it's quite common to, we'll wait for the table. No worries. And then I think there's also in the States, especially there's that sort of, well, the restaurant closes at 9, but as long as I'm in by 8:45, I can stay. And here it's like, no. If you're not in by 8, you can't stay. So
yeah, this one is very particular. I highly recommend getting there before they open and probably 30 minutes before they open. Get there an hour early and go grab a glass of wine if you want to drink, or have a glass of bubbly water somewhere. Cute places around.
I wasn't saying even after we left though. We got in there again early, 7:15, and then we left by like 8:30, and there was an even bigger line than when we had arrived. So it seemed like people were waiting to get in. So
they do not take reservations.
Correct. Yes.
Just want to make that clear.
Yes.
So yeah, you're gonna have to wait in line because it's so popular.
Yeah. On to the next. I apologize. I'm
it's good. So I want to mention one. We're hopping back across the river now. One restaurant that we ate at that was not quite as home cooking, but still really authentic feeling, very Italian feeling, is called Trattoria Le Mosacche or Mosacce.
I think it's Che.
C-C-E.
Oh, C-C-C. Yeah, C-C-E.
Mosacce.
Mosacce, yeah.
I think so. I'm still learning Italian, y'all. Sorry. And it was really lovely. So it is a very small restaurant, very close to the historic area, really easy to get to. And I would recommend calling for a reservation there. It's got 4 tables.
Yeah, exactly.
Maybe 5. Cute little weird kitchen that's in the back.
It's kind of next to the table.
Exactly. One chef stuck in it's like a walk-in closet size kitchen is what they're working with. But really good fresh food there. Yeah. And that's where you mentioned earlier in the episode, you mentioned businessmen.
Yeah,
there
exactly.
were two tables of businessmen who had the vibe that they just got off work and went to go grab some dinner.
And they knew each other, and they clearly worked with each other, but they just weren't sitting together. So it's just sort of, they occasionally were having conversations over, again,
everybody in the restaurant.
And it's such a small restaurant, so it was like, but it's kind of like, I don't know, it had that vibe of like school children at a cafeteria, where you're kind of like talking over, hey, how you doing? Oh, I'm good. And
Absolutely.
I will say, it's funny you mentioned that the one cook in the back, there was technically 2 cooks, but one of them, he was visiting his girlfriend who was there reading a book with they had a dog, it was like, again, I say that because it really paints the picture of, it was very chill. We got there early to make a reservation. They were having a family meal before, while we were like, when we went the first to make the reservation, they're having a little family meal. And so we're like, oh, this is kind of cute.
Which is for people who haven't worked in restaurants, that's the meal that like the waiters and all the staff of the restaurant have before they start service.
We don't have that really in the States anymore. That's a sad thing. But
some people do.
Some people.
Okay.
It used to be a lot more common. It used to be like one of the big reasons like to get a waiting job or any sort of kitchen job in the States was like, oh, you get a meal. And now it's like, no, like in the Bear, they do it. I think that's about it. But I was also going to mention too, one thing that really cinched it for us was the fact that they have dessert, and we're like, what's the dessert? And he points, and it's a glass bowl, and it is essentially, I can't remember what it was, but it was like a layered cake and cream and strawberries. And he's like, it's a scoop of that if you want it. And I was like, yeah.
He's like, it's really good. And everybody was getting it. Everybody, and he was so diligent too to get like the perfect scoop that had the right amount of, I think it had strawberries in it.
Yeah.
Had the right amount of strawberries for every person, so they got a nice little helping. And that restaurant also has communal tables, right? We were sitting with another couple.
Person, yeah. So I will say it's a fun. Again, some of these can be kitschy. I will say because again, if you're like, oh, I get it, the communal tables, we have that where I am. It's the Italian thing, but some of it is just kind of fun when there's like for us at least, there's the difference between some of the like the table, the bowl is a good example of like. I almost would never consider that in the States where you would scoop a dessert out of a bowl in front of somebody and be like, here you go. Right. That's your dessert. And you're going to, somebody next to you is going to have another scoop. But you do that at your house. It's, of course, you'd make it for like a barbecue or a cookout or something. As you think in the States, it's like everything's portioned really like kind of.
Well, it reminds me of the same kind of food that like my parents and grandparents would have gone out for back in the day.
Yeah.
It's like not even like family style, but it's just a little bit more relaxed, and it's going to be good even if it doesn't look perfect and polished. It's going to taste really good, and it's made with good ingredients.
Yeah, exactly. So it's a lot of fun. And that was actually really quite close to the Duomo area. It was like, I mean, we went there because again, it was kind of right. I mean, it was seemed really close, right down the further street from our hotel. It seemed kind of intimate inside. We're like,
And
yeah, let's give it a
reasonably
shot.
affordable, I have to say, which is why we're recommending it. Good food, nice energy, affordable, quite close to the historic area. Remarkably, I thought it blew my expectations away. I have to say, it wasn't like the best food ever,
No,
but given how close it was to everything,
and I think it was
really
like
worth
50 or 60 euros for two people, which included like wine and dessert and like I think at least a pasta and something else each. So I mean, it was a pretty, like in that sense, that like 30 euros a person is quite reasonable in terms of being in Florence or even being in Rome, wherever. But yeah.
So let's quickly go through just a couple of cafes, and then we're going to end with two of our favorite spots, I feel like, in Florence, mainstays. So Cafe Gili is a new place that we hadn't been before because it looks hecka fancy, and it is quite fancy. But pro tip, if you have any food or, well, I mean, it's pastries or coffee at the bar, you can tell I need another cafe. If you have a coffee or pastries at the bar, it is much cheaper than sitting. However, I will say that if you are used to like $5 coffees where you're from and $5 pastries, it is well worth sitting because it is in the Piazza della Repubblica, and it has like just a lovely little seating area. It's quite fancy looking. Highly recommend it. We had a really cool, it's not Italian, but it was great. Like a cube croissant, which is a croissant baked in the shape of a cube, and it was filled with jam, like apricot jam or something. It was wild.
And again, it's one of those things that I will say it felt very Instagrammy, where you're like, clearly it's we have to take a photo and post it. However,
I took a photo of it.
Well, it didn't also stop it from being very good. I mean, from being quite like it. That did not stop it from being a very good pastry.
Right.
If that makes sense.
It wasn't just for show. It also tasted very good.
Exactly. Thank you. I'm like ruining my words right now.
And I will say that at this bar specifically, it's a big bank of a bar. Essentially, it's really, really big. They have a giant pastry case, lots of fancy seating, indoor and outdoor. But you do have to order at the little desk when you enter, and then you take your receipt up to the bar for whatever you want.
Yeah, exactly. It's like it's one of those pay first and then order later. Not order later, but then go get your food.
But highly recommend it. We hadn't eaten in there because we thought it was going to be really expensive because it looks so fancy, but it's affordable if you eat it.
It's one of those things, and again, I will say a lot of times you don't know until you order something. Like the coffee is set by the region, and they can't go above a certain price if it's at a bar, so it can only be a 150 or 180 or whatever it is. And so that's what we knew. Like that's gonna be safe. But the pastries, I don't believe are in that sort of financial scheme, if you will.
Right. They're not on a set price by the government. And
so sometimes it's a bit of a bummer when you say expensive. We've been in situations where you do spend €9 on a pastry, and you're like, Dad would not have spent €9 on a pastry had I known it would be €9. And again, it's different when you're in the New York City or something like that. We spend €9 on a pastry. Like every time we visit, we're like, should we get stuff? And they're like, that was expensive, but it's New York City, so you kind of expect it. But I think even where we are, in Savannah, I mean, specifically when we visit the States, it's like we expect to spend €4 on a pastry. We're like, that's what pastries cost in Savannah. It's fine. But then when you spend that even in Italy, we're like, 4? Is it special? Yeah. So I think it's more of a mental, like you automatically mentally adjust prices to where you are, obviously. Right. So if you are from the city, from New York City or something like that, and you're used to, €10 pastries, you're going to have no problem, honestly, anywhere. When we say expensive, we do not mean like €40 or €15. We just mean like 10, really.
Yeah. And I do want to touch on Fedora, which we recommend all the time in all of our episodes about Florence. And it is a pastry school that also has a cafe. And I just want to say that we're cooling on it a little bit because I think we went during COVID, the two first times we went, and it was serene and there were very few people there, and the pastries were incredible. And I will say that this time we went, the pastries were still good, but they were a little less, not Venetian. What is it called?
Venezuela, from Vienna.
Vienna, yeah. A little less Viennese, a little less French, more American, like peanut butter brownies and muffins, which is fine.
But the first time we went, it was all like pain au chocolat, and then sort of, again, that rolled pastry. Rolled pastry, is that what? Layered pastry, the butter layered pastry. That's the classic croissant.
Exactly.
Pain au chocolat with like raspberry jam or something. And it was really quite. It felt very like, ooh, like again, I'm getting a French pastry or a Vienna pastry or something like really like interesting. And then, sorry, now that I'm interrupting you, it's just that as you mentioned the peanut butter brownie, and that was a real example. And other things felt like, oh, Yeah, no, we also have those, but it
Right.
felt a little bit of a, I mean, we live in Italy, so it's a little bit different, but I think if I were coming from the States, from a place that makes peanut butter brownies to a place that makes peanut butter brownies, I'd be like, oh,
Hmm.
I was really hoping for something
And it's
else.
just the nature of it. I mean, it's a pastry school, so it's whatever they made that day to
Exactly.
practice pastries is what you're going to get. I will also say that it seemed like school was just coming into, what's it called? Not fruition.
I know that's the worst thing, but like it was, the term had just started.
Right, exactly. So it was packed with American students, and it was just a different vibe than we expected.
It,
So,
as you mentioned off mic, it had a bit more of a cafeteria and a college vibe.
hmm,
Not like, and not how it looked or anything like that, to be clear, just more of the energy. It
right,
wasn't as many sort of, I think before getting kind of, some Italian tourists, sometimes just parents of the students, but it was a little more calm. It was a little more, it was like, we're just here to have coffee outside. Cause again, we mentioned there's rose bushes and vines and it's really beautiful
beautiful garden
outside.
area. Yeah,
Gorgeous, quiet, really peaceful. And again, because it's a school, everything is quite cheap in terms of, I think we went with my father and brother, and it was like €10 for 4 pastries and 4 coffees, which is
hmm,
even at a, I mean, and anywhere, it's like, that was really wow. Like, and we were all expecting, 20, 30, €40 just because we're like, oh, these look really fancy. So it was just a bit of a like, oh, this is a slightly different experience.
hmm.
So yeah, I think it's smart to mention that we feel like we're the stock market. Like, we're not really having a buy order anymore. We're cooling on it. It's a
Uh-huh,
soft buy.
uh-huh. It's a bull or a bear or a something. I don't know.
Exactly.
Stocks.
Yeah. Up or
So,
down. I don't know.
so I do want to mention the Il Mercato Centrale, which is very famous.
Not a cafe though.
Not a cafe.
Okay.
It's sorry, still on the food on the north side of the river.
Okay.
So it's very famous. Lots of people go there. It's big for tourists. I didn't like it. We've been there twice, and it makes me very, very anxious because it is loud and crowded. You might really love that. So I'm not saying it's bad for everybody. It just made me anxious. It definitely has a like a upscale cafeteria.
More like I think you mentioned off mic food court.
Food court. That's what
Yeah.
it is. You know,
Like
an
a mall food
upscale
court, like a really
mall.
nice mall
Yeah.
food court.
And you could compare it to the Milan train station. Weirdly, has a great, I don't know, restaurant area where it also
Same
has
kind of
booths.
same deal. Yeah, exactly.
So
There's
it's
a
a big,
famous one in Atlanta or in Philadelphia. Is it?
yeah,
There's a couple of those like where they converted something into this market where it's a bunch of different food stalls, and you kind of go and and it's supposed to. I mean, again, I've heard great things. I think there's one in Atlanta. I think there's one in Philadelphia. I think there's like Chelsea Market, a famous one.
I
Am I
don't
like
know.
making things up at this point? And I don't know if it's in Chelsea or in Chelsea, New York or something. But I say that because it's clearly modeled after other more famous ones, if that makes sense. It's not like their own creation. It's
Right. And it's on top of, so the first floor is a regular like produce and fresh meat
butchers
and
and
yeah, exactly, market. And then the second floor is the food court style thing. It's kind of expensive, I think. I mean, I think you would think in that situation it would be less expensive than other restaurants, but it's pretty on par with restaurant prices. And if you're family and you're looking for, everybody wants something different, I think that's a great option. But for me, it was expensive and loud
And
and
just
crowded.
in terms of price, it was like 15 to 20 per plate, for lack of a better word. And that is what, again, but I'm just thinking family of four, that's almost €100 to eat somewhere, where there are different places in Florence that are cheaper
Right.
in terms of that. And the only thing is and again, this, though, I think the one major selling point for the market is it was quite international.
Yes.
So it wasn't only Italian food. It was actually, I think it was very little Italian food. It was kind
I
of
would
food from
agree.
all over the world. So it did have a sense of like, I just kind of want something that isn't red sauce and pasta. And then I think the Mercato Centrale works. But I will say that neighborhood around it actually has like, I don't know, 15, 20 different Chinese restaurants. So if you are feeling like you don't want pasta and red sauce, there are other restaurants actually in Florence. It's
Yeah.
kind of that neighborhood. There's a few side streets that are all, I think we went to them a couple times just because we were like, ooh, this will be fun and different.
Yeah,
We don't get
absolutely.
those where we are. So it's kind of nice.
So I want to finish up with two of our mainstays in Florence when we do visit. One is Vino di Vino, which is a wine bar, but not really a bar where you can go in. You get wine either by the bottle, like filled up by the bottle, or a cup of wine to go. And it's just really cool. It's really inexpensive. I think it's €2 for a glass of wine. The guy who works there, I'm going to put his name in the description because he's really lovely, but I'm bad with names. Knows all about the wines that he has, and it's just a very happy, joyful place to go grab a really cheap glass of wine to walk around with.
which might not make you look very Italian, but it is lovely to do.
But it's still fun.
Yes. Only because I mentioned earlier that walking around with wine or any sort of drink.
You're going to not look Italian. You can stand outside and have it, though. That's what
then
we did.
Then you'll look super Italian.
Yeah. So stand outside drinking wine, very Italian.
Yeah.
You start moving, you look American.
Yeah. I think that's it.
And our last recommendation is Da Vinatieri, and it is a super awesome hole-in-the-wall sandwich shop in very much the main center. And so the Vino di Vino is also very much in this historic tourist center, and Da Vinatieri, which is hard for me to say, very close to all of the tourist attractions and historic area.
And the reason, if I may, one thought on the sandwich shop is there are a number of really good sandwich shops in Florence. They are famous for it. And we often encourage people because basically the famous one is the All'Antico Vignaio, which is like, I don't know, quite famous. There's like 4 of them right next to each other in Florence because of how famous it is. They need multiple locations in order to sort of space out the line a little bit.
They're also in lots of other Italian cities
Rome,
now.
Milan,
and I
Salerno,
think there's one in like New York or something.
Yeah, they've gone a little international, which is amazing for them, genuinely. And it is something, again, when you talk to people from Florence, a lot of them are like the exact same sandwich they sell there is sold here, and here for half the price or a third of the price. It doesn't have as good Instagram game or as TripAdvisor game,
branding,
or TikTok game or whatever it is. It's just branding. And I say that because an average sandwich in Florence is about €5. Mm-hmm. So when you're spending $9 to $13 to $14, it's kind of like, what is this that much better?
I think $9.50 was their standard price for a lot of their sandwiches.
And other ones were just like $5, and it was kind of like same thing, same sort of quality of meat, same size bread. It was just like, huh. So I only say that too, like if you feel like you're missing out on like that's the thing to do. I mean, imagine again. I always think we come from a very touristy city, so I always compare things in the U.S.
Yeah.
So I always compare stuff of like, oh, I need to do the touristy thing. I'm like, you don't. Trust me, you don't. You can do this other thing and have exactly the same experience, if not better, because you don't have to wait in line for 2.5 hours. Mm-hmm. So I think that is for me the trade-off is there are amazing sandwiches in Florence, famous for sandwiches, and so you can't really go wrong in terms of. I mean, you can go wrong, but it's hard. I'll say it's hard.
There's a lot of really good ones. We really love Da Vinatieri for lots of reasons, but it's the same thing that keeps coming up in all of our restaurant recommendations. It's that people pop in who clearly know the owner. There are regulars who clearly come in like almost every day. They have their standard order, and they're just popping in to say hi. Like it's a very much, even though this place is in the middle of the historic area. Every time we go, there's people who pop in and like, hey, how's it going? Blah, blah, blah. I'll take my regular to go. And it's just nice that it's like a neighborhood local spot. And
I will say for me, because we've talked about like kind of not falling out of love with Fedora, but cooling on it a little bit. And when we went traveling in 2022 and first went to Florence and Siena and stuff like that, there were certain prices, right? And then we visited again in 2023 or 2024 and like, oh, they've gone up some. I think we mentioned this trip to Venice as we stopped in other places. We're like, dang, things have really gone up. And like even things in Venice went up since like a couple months prior to it. And I will say that the Da Vinatieri has not, it's like still €5 or five. Somehow. It was $4.50 or $5.50 sandwich. But I realized, I went back to my photos and I'm like, oh, it's been the same for 3 or 4 years, which is only insane because I think every time we go anywhere, it feels like, did everything just get like $1 or $2 more expensive? Is it what's going on here? Or €1 or €2 more expensive? And it feels like that, especially with the States, where every time I feel like we go back, like every pizza or sandwich or, thing if we go out to eat, we're like, I thought this was 16 and now it's 18. Was it always 18? So it's nice when it's like, oh, wow, you guys haven't changed. Like the price is the same, the size is the same. It's still, you're still really excited. And I think the thing is they always seem very excited to be there.
Yeah, absolutely.
And like sharing with the, what do you think? Would you like it? Do you want me to,
Yeah. They always ask if you like it at the end. It's like the one guy pretty much who runs it. And I will say that there is very limited seating inside and outside. Sometimes he'll have some stools out there. Inside there's like 3 stools essentially for sitting. Yeah. It's very tight. But also they're known for their tripe. There's a little tripe window, which is really fun. Lots of people get tripe there. But as a vegetarian, I will say there are 2 or 3 really good, interesting vegetarian sandwiches there, which is always fun. Yeah,
absolutely. So that if you're going to Florence, this was just a fun chill episode. Next week will be the one that's really condensed and bum 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 bum. It's supposed to be fast paced.
Yes.
So I think that's everything, right?
I think that was everything.
We've
I've
talked your
talked
ears
so
off.
much about food. I'm going to go make some lunch now.
I know, it's late. That being said, thank you all so much for listening. We didn't do our little intro, but we really do appreciate everybody who's been listening, everyone who's been following, especially actually after that last episode. We've gotten like almost 20 followers since that last episode, which we really appreciate. It means that potentially it was well received. Unless you hate
Yeah,
following
we really
us.
appreciate it because it was a heavy episode. I put a lot of effort into the research. I didn't have to research Florence. I just went and had a good time, and now we're recounting how fun it was. But it means a lot that we got some people who appreciated the work we put in, I guess. That's
Absolutely.
what I mean to say.
And thank you all seriously so much for listening and for continuing to listen, for your continued support.
And if you want to reach out, you can find us on our website, which is onlyabag.com. You can send us a message there. You can find us on Instagram at onlyabagpodcast. If you want to contact us, say hi. If you have questions about your upcoming trip and want our advice, please feel free to reach out.
Absolutely. And if you'd like to support the channel, if you like what you hear and you want us to continue, you can actually support us financially as well as listening, as well as telling your friends about us. But if you'd like to support us financially, we have a Ko-fi, ko-fi.com/onlyabag. The links will be in the description for all of these. And genuinely, thank you all so much for listening. We do appreciate it. And we enjoy doing this. So we hope you enjoy listening.
Yeah, we love you guys. Tanti abbracci.